Hello and welcome to Vovork. I'm Brian Watrous. This is the fifth in a 10-part video series in which we're exploring how to build a vCenter Orchestrator environment on top of VMware Fusion. In the previous video, we saw how to install and configure our first virtual ESXi host, and in this video, we will do the same thing for the second virtual ESXi host. Okay, chances are you've already figured out that the installation procedure for the second virtualized ESXi host is the same as the first virtualized ESXi host. You saw how to do that in the previous video, but there are a few little differences. You don't have to watch this whole video, but to make certain that you catch the differences, I've pointed them out here. So because we're installing a different host this time, we're going to modify the name of the folder where we store the VM's files, and we're going to modify the names of the VM files themselves too. Additionally, we're going to modify the host name of this new host, because this time it's not ESXi01 that we're installing, it's ESXi02. And since it's a different host, it needs a different IP address. This time it's not going to be 172.16.245.101, it's going to be .102. Now, if you watched all of the first video, you'll recall that I want to size the two different virtualized ESXi hosts differently. The first host, where we're going to be running the vCenter server virtual appliance, which requires more RAM, is going to be our bigger of our two hosts. The second ESXi host, the one that we're installing right now, we're actually going to make as a 3 GB virtual machine. Now, we can't do that. The first one's going to be a 5 GB virtual machine, and we could do the 5 GB right from the start. But this second virtualized ESXi host, we can't start off by saying that we want a 3 GB virtual machine for the second virtualized host, because if you do, if you say that, you're going to get this warning message, which tells you, hey, Bozo, you can't do that. You have to say at least 4 GB during the installation of your ESXi host. But after the installation, you can adjust, including adjusting the amount of memory downward. So we're going to install this host initially as a 4 GB host, but we're going to drop it down to 3 GB after the installation. In doing so, by dropping from 4 gigs to 3 gigs, this is probably another instance where we're venturing into the land of unsupported configuration. But again, for our lab environment, we're willing to accept that. So we're going to install the second host first as a 4 GB host, but we'll drop it down to 3 GB after the installation is complete. So that's the big difference for the second host. You can see all the points here. So if you want to skip the rest of this video, feel free to do so. But for the rest of us, what I'm going to do is go over to my VMware Fusion application where you can see our first host. We're done for right now with the first host, so I'm going to minimize it. And then back in the virtual machine library, if you don't see that on your system, go to Window and choose Virtual Machine Library. But back in the virtual machine library, we're going to go through essentially the same steps again. We're going to click on the down arrow button on the Add button and choose New. We're going to click on More Options and choose Create a Custom Virtual Machine, followed by clicking the Continue button. We'll specify ESXi 5 is the operating system that we're going to install in this virtual machine and click Continue. We'll choose Create a New Virtual Disk and click Continue. And for the same reasons as last time, we're going to click the Customize Settings button. And you'll recall that in my Documents folder, in the Virtual Machines folder in there, in the vSphere 5.5 Update 1A folder in there, we have a folder called ESXi 55U1 Host 1. That's the folder where our first host is installed. We're going to install the second host into this other folder. So we'll click there, and the name of the host is going to be, it's actually the same as the name of the first host. So I'm just going to go over here and cheat. By selecting that, you'll notice this is changed up here to the same name as host 1. I'll change that to host 2. But make certain you install the files for host 2 in the host 2 folder. And we'll click Save. Now, same drill as before. We're going to go through the customization wizard. We'll go to processors. We've got a 2 virtual CPU configuration with 4 gigabytes of memory. Perfect. We'll then go to the hard disk section. Again, we have a 40 gigabyte virtual disk, but we want to click on the arrow by advanced options to make certain that the pre-allocate disk space checkbox is unchecked. That means we're going to end up with a thin provision virtual disk. I'll click show all again. Under network adapter, I'm making certain that my adapter is enabled and plugged into the share with my Mac network. I'll click show all one more time. And then under CD-ROM, we want to make certain that the CD-ROM is enabled, and we'll browse to our ISO image for our installation. That's the same ISO file as before, so we'll select the ISO file and click open. We'll close the customization wizard, and we'll power on this virtual machine. Now once again, I'm going to scoot this window up a little bit here. I click in the window to give it keyboard focus. I could wait 4 more seconds or just hit enter. And we'll now wait a few moments while the ESXi installer boots up. As we saw in the last video, I need to type my root password. And I need to type it correctly. And the installation will continue. Same warning message as last time, so doing the same thing as before. And apparently I need to type that password for a 3rd time. There we go. Success. As you can see, the installation engine is up and running. To continue, I'll hit enter. Once again, we see the end user license agreement. We read it, then we agree to it by typing F11. We only have one virtual disk to select, so we'll once again choose the local 40 gigabyte thin provision virtual disk, and we'll type enter to continue. We'll choose the US keyboard and type enter to continue. We'll set the password. Once again, the password is going to be capital V, capital M, WARE, 1 bang, capital V, capital M, WARE, 1 bang. And we'll type enter to continue. Once again, the installer is going to go through a scanning process. And now that the scan is complete, to continue with the installation, we will type F11. And a short time later, our second virtual ESXi host is installed. To reboot, I'll hit the enter key. Now that the second host is rebooted, we need to change a few networking configuration parameters, just like we did with the first host. And it's here that we're going to have to be real careful that we're typing information that's appropriate for the second host. So to do so, we'll type F2 to go into the customization screen. Before we go in there, we have to specify the root password. So I'm typing capital V, capital M, WARE, 1 bang, enter. And in here, we'll scroll down to configure management network and hit enter. We'll scroll down to IP configuration and hit enter. We'll use the down arrow key to go down to static IP. Notice we have to hit the spacebar to select this option. And then we can go down and change the IP address to the correct IP address for our second host, which in the case of my lab environment is .102. The subnet mask is fine, and this default gateway is fine. So we'll hit enter to continue. We'll then go to DNS configuration. We'll hit enter. And for primary DNS server, this is not the right IP address. The correct IP address is .1. I don't have an alternate DNS server, so I'll leave that blank. The host name is not correct. This is the second host, so we're going to type ESXi02. And to continue, we'll hit the enter key. For custom DNS suffixes, again, we'll scroll down, hit enter. And the suffix in my lab environment is vvork.info. That's my domain name. You'll type your domain name instead. And then we'll hit enter to continue. Having made those changes, to commit them, we'll hit escape. We're prompted to see whether or not we actually want to make those changes. We'll type Y to continue. And now back on the main screen, to test our configuration, we'll scroll down to Test Management Network, hit enter. We'll just go with the first two defaults. I explained in the previous video what those are. And in the previous video, I changed ESXi02.local domain. We're going to change to our domain name. We'll hit enter to continue. And we're just making certain that all these tests report OK, which they do. So we'll hit enter to continue. And at that point, we've got this host properly configured. So to work my way out the DCUI configuration screen, I'll hit escape. And we're back on the main screen. Now, if I wanted a 4 GB host, I could just leave this as is, but you'll recall we're going to drop down the amount of memory in this host from 4 GB to 3 GB. So to do so, I will type function key 12. Again, I have to authenticate, capital V, capital M, WARE1, bang. I'll hit enter to continue. And then you can see I've got a couple different choices here. I'm going to choose to actually shut down the host this time, because before I boot it up again, I need to go into the configuration utility. And I don't want to have to rush to get into the configuration wizard. So I'm going to type function key 2, and the host starts shutting down. Now that my second host is shut down, I'm going to go to the menu and choose Window, Virtual Machine Library. Here's the virtual machine library again, and for this second host that we just created, I'm going to select the host and click Settings. Then under Processors and Memory, instead of having a virtual machine that's 4 GB, I'm going to create a virtual machine that is 3072 megabytes. So from 4 gigs down to 3 gigs. And we'll close the customization wizard window. Now one last tiny little bit of cleanup work here. I'm going to drag my second host into the folder that I created before. And what the heck, while we're here, I'm going to go check this, the first host. Let me reorder those. I'm going to check the first host because I don't recall ever changing it to be a 5 GB host. So I'm going to edit its settings, go to Processors and Memory, and sure enough, I haven't done so. So I'm going to change the amount of memory here. I won't do it in the video, but I'm going to change the amount of, I'm going to stop the host, change the amount of memory, and set the this first host to be a 5 GB host. So there you have it. We now have both of our virtualized ESXi hosts installed. Be sure to stick around for the next video, because in the next video we'll show you how to install the vSphere client, which is a necessary component so that we can install the vCenter server. So see you in the next video.